Okay, so I'm here with Dr. Jill Stein. Hello, Dr. Stein.
Good to be with you, Craig.
And Dr. Stein, in case people don't know, is running for the Green Party nomination for president. And just, I think people assume that you've already been anointed the party, representative. There are other people running for the nomination, and there's going to be a party, like the Green Party is like any other political party. There's a nominating convention, and those similar processes go on. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens?
Yes, so like any other party, the Green Party has a process at the state level, and that may be a statewide primary where everybody goes out and votes. Like recently, just the other day in Arizona, the Green Party had its primary as well. In some states, it's just a convention, sort of a caucus-like affair, and then all the states get together. This year it will be in Houston in the summer, because what better place to go when it's summertime than Houston? With no truly great, exciting things happening with the Green Party in Texas, and really important for the world to know about it. So it'll be a really exciting place to be, where many of the struggles actually that we're fighting across the nation and across the world converge in Texas. Along the border there, many issues of justice and sustainability and climate change and all that. So, the people are rising up everywhere, and they're rising up in Texas.
Right.
So yes, the nomination process is about as far along as it is with the other parties, and it's not formally concluded until convention day. That said, I have the advantage of having been the candidate in 2012. When you are an independent party, you can't rely on big money, and we don't accept corporate money, and we don't have big machines. So it really falls on candidates to kind of build their momentum and to build their teams above all. And in the process of doing that, we are working to help build the parties and to help build the team for this campaign, piggybacking on all the other campaigns that our team has run over the past 16 years, really. It's not an easy thing to run for office, and you have to be prepared to run many times in order to really build the momentum that we need in order to break through this stranglehold of big money and corporate power that everybody is fighting. And I'll just conclude saying the wonderful thing is that as Greens, we've been ahead of the curve on green energy, on equal marriage, on nonviolent conflict resolution, on climate change, on local economies and public banks, you name it. We have been ahead of the curve, and the curve has been catching up to us with a vengeance. So we're in a very good place as this transformative moment really rolls out for us. We are the one national party that is not poisoned by corporate money, and that is here of, by, and for the people at the moment that people are waking up, that we really need a politics of integrity.
Right, excellent. But people should also know, like, there was just a big victory for the Green Party in Georgia, can you just explain a little bit about what happened and why that's such a victory, and this battle that goes on to get on the ballot in these states? I mean, it's just not assumed that you're on the ballot in every state, and what an independent party has to go through.
Yes, I mean, it's a testimony to what a very severely compromised system we're living in, that the party, and actually any independent political party that's not the establishment, that's not the Democrats and Republicans, has to jump through all kinds of hoops. Because basically the rules, these very oppressive rules for how you can participate in elections, we call them ballot access laws, getting on the ballot. It's a very restrictive, draconian process. There are 50 different sets of rules in 50 states. They're changing all the time. It requires an enormous administrative apparatus just to keep up with these rules. And then the rules themselves are very oppressive. I mean, this is how tyrannical government keeps challengers silenced. It's very much a system of political oppression. They silence opposition parties by making the rules so difficult. So in Georgia, the signature requirement was something like, it was close to, I want to say, actually, no, it's North Carolina that's close to 100,000 signatures. North Carolina is the next place we're going in the court battles. But in Georgia, what it required was 50,000 signatures, which is pretty horrible in itself. But in addition, there were all kinds of requirements for those signatures having to do with who could collect and what kinds of notaries they had to get to sign on, to get their sworn statements about how the signatures were collected. So the conditions in Georgia were extremely oppressive. The Green Party's never gotten on the ballot. I'm not sure that independent parties have. It is one of the most difficult states in the country. And we went to court together with the Libertarians and possibly some other third parties as well. We went to court saying that this is a real, this is voter suppression. It's voting, it's suppressing voters throughout the whole state. Suppressing groups of voters is horrible, and it's also horrible to suppress the vote of everybody by denying people their real choices on the ballot. And basically the court agreed and said that this requirement would be struck down, and they came up with a requirement that I believe is something like 7,000, maybe 7,500 signatures. So this is doable. There's no doubt that we are going to get on the ballot for the first time in Georgia. It's very exciting. And kudos to the Georgia Green Party and Bruce Dixon and all those folks who've been fighting for all of us. A threat to suppression of democracy anywhere is a threat to democracy everywhere. So this is a victory for us all.
Yeah. So people know in Georgia, if they are independents or looking to support the Green Party, they should get their signature. They should go to the Georgia Green Party website. How do they go about supporting in that context?
At this point, we can definitely use your help collecting signatures. I mean, we need your signature, but we also need your help to take a petition and get friends to sign it and family and, take it to your meetings and schools and so on. And the best way to do that, actually, you can do that either by going to the Georgia Green Party site, or you can go to our website, Jill2016.com, because we're working together with the state party. So one way or the other, we will be helping to support volunteers and reaching out to make sure that we get on the ballot as quickly as possible.
Great. And is there a deadline?
I don't know offhand because, it's like a total shock. And none of us were expecting that we could really, go to work hard and fast on Georgia, but it looks like we're going to be able to. I know their deadline is not immediate. North Carolina, on the other hand, is in the midst of their signature collection right now. I'm not aware that Georgia's is closing in, unlike, say, Illinois, which has 90 days to collect 45,000 signatures approximately. I mean, talk about, draconian requirements. It's just an incredible act of heroism that Illinois keeps doing the work to get on the ballot, because we usually get on the ballot in spite of the very oppressive requirements in Illinois. But while the number in Illinois is really high, it's a shade lower than Georgia, but Georgia has all these other ridiculous requirements that make the number even far worse. So yes, I'd say everybody come to our website, Jill2016.com. And if your state is already on the ballot, and I should add that we are, we're doing well. We usually have to run this gauntlet. And right now we have, I believe it's about 66% of voters who are already where we're already on the ballot and where you already have an independent choice, a choice for democracy and justice that's not part of the same corporate system. Right. So we're well on the way, but we have some real challenges ahead. Georgia, North Carolina, Illinois, Pennsylvania are the biggest ones. There are some smaller hurdles around the country. So wherever you are, your state may already be on. For example, New York, Texas, California, the biggest population states are actually on already, Florida. But if you're anywhere in the neighborhood or people in those other states, we need you anyhow to help make this happen.
Great. Yesterday, there was an endorsement in Rolling Stone magazine, which you probably saw, which was so perverse in so many ways. I mean, Rolling Stone, which used to be the voice of the youth, is just sort of now it's the mouthpiece of the status quo elite. particularly the Democratic Party elite. And Jan Wenner, who's the publisher, of the Rolling Stone, wrote, "I've been to the revolution before. It ain't happening," which in itself is, you can pick that apart, and whatever hair's left on my head, I could pull it out. And he goes on to say, on the other hand, Hillary Clinton is one of the most qualified candidates for the presidency in modern times, as was Al Gore. We cannot forget what happened when Al Gore lost to George W. Bush and was elected and became arguably one of the worst presidents in American history. The votes cast for the fantasy of Ralph Nader were enough to cost Gore the presidency. Imagine what a similar calculation would do to this country if a protest vote would put the presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court all in the hands of the extreme right wing that now controls the Republican Party. So first of all, can you put that little line of BS there to bed once and for all for people? The whole Ralph Nader cost Al Gore the election.
Definitely. I also want to address some of the very deceptive, misleading, and intimidating premises that you repeated there in that quote. First, the idea that the revolution ain't happening. Well, it ain't happening wherever, this Rolling Stone editorial board is. The revolution definitely ain't happening there. But out on the streets, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our colleges and universities, on the front lines of struggle for Black lives, for immigrants, young people, elders who are losing, their means of support and their lifelines with Medicare and Social Security that are being eroded. The revolution is happening outside of the halls of power. And it's unfortunate if some individuals at the Rolling Stone identify with the halls of power. I don't think, that's true for everybody there. But the revolution is alive and well and getting stronger by the day. And one indicator of that, for example, is a recent Wall Street Journal poll done last summer that showed, in fact, that the largest block of voters, 50% of voters, have divorced the Democratic and Republican parties. 21% of the American electorate now identify as Republicans. 29% identify as Democrats. And the rest are either small independent parties or they're independent because we're all being thrown under the bus. Now, certain people in privileged positions are not being thrown under the bus, and you're very lucky, and that's great. But don't think that applies to the rest of America that is struggling to keep its head above water, to keep a roof over its head, to get food on the table, and to get out of debt. Wages right now, for example, are barely above the poverty level. That's average wages. Household wealth has been cut in half. A generation of young people is locked into debt with no way to get out. And so just, as the key rebuttal here, I want to drive home that there are enough votes right now, not only that 50% who rejects Democrats and Republicans, but just to look at young people who are in debt, for whom there is no future, for whom both parties have been equally, the predators that have thrown them to the wolves. The numbers say, actually, that 43 million young people are locked into student debt right now. That's young people and actually middle-aged people right now. So that's 43 million. And it turns out 43 million is enough to actually win an election. So, the predators, the political predators are out there working overtime to try to persuade people that you are powerless. But in fact, we are not powerless. We are powerful. We have the visions, we have the values that the American people are clamoring for. We actually have the solutions, and lo and behold, we actually have the numbers. The minute we have the courage of our convictions and we stand up to take our future back and not be silenced. The whole Nader demonization thing is all about frightening people. And they're asking people to exercise collective amnesia. Because as bad as policies were under George Bush, policy for policy, each one really got much worse under Barack Obama. For example, the bailouts that were $700 billion under Bush turned into several $1 trillion 16 trillion if you count all the basically zero or near zero interest loans that were made available to banks and to Wall Street and to large corporations. So, this is basically a 16 trillion dollar bailout that they got compared to the 700 billion under Bush. And by the way, that was with two Democratic houses of Congress as well as Democrats in the White House. If you look at the expanding war, the attack on our civil liberties, the use of the Espionage Act to suppress free speech and a free press. If you look at the incredible attack on immigrants and the deportations, which were far worse under Obama than anyone else. The war's expanded massively. Obama didn't end the war in Iraq. He tried to prolong it, in fact, but it was George Bush's commitment to a date of withdrawal and the end of immunity for U.S. soldiers that forced his hand. And now we're back in. It turns out to the tune of, 5,000 soldiers in Iraq right now, let alone the expansion. How about Libya? How about the surge into Afghanistan? You can't blame that on the Republicans and George Bush. So, this is how the power structure, which feels very threatened, tries to brainwash you into basically a fear campaign and into supporting Democrats. So the Democrats are not saving us. Around the margins, there may be differences, but those differences are not enough to save your job, to save your life, or to save the planet. It falls to us to save ourselves, to revive our democracy, to throw off this yoke of fear. And, it's as simple as that. The lesser evil actually paves the way to the greater evil. It's not it doesn't save us. It actually tips the playing field further towards the greater evil. We saw this happen after Obama's election. What happened? First, we lost the House, which went from blue to red, and then we lost the Senate. Why? Because people were so incredibly disappointed and pissed off at what a lesser evil politician can do, which isn't very much. And this has happened in 2014 in a very big way, where the states flipped also, the governors and the legislatures also flipped from blue to red. So a lesser evil Democratic Party, it just paves the way to the Republicans. Why? Because its base stays home. People don't come out to vote. 80% of young people stayed home in 2014. So the name of the game here, the bottom line is, forget this propaganda campaign. Democracy needs a moral compass. It needs values and visions. We have to stand up. Don't be silenced. Don't be intimidated into letting a corporate lesser evil party stand for you. Even when there's an occasional good candidate, the power behind that candidate is moving things in the wrong direction. The Democratic Party has had a series of progressive, very compelling candidates. Jesse Jackson, Dennis Kucinich, Howard Dean for that matter, and the party takes them all down in various ways. So don't put your stock, and as the party takes down their progressive candidates, by the way, they just keep marching to the right. They become more militarist, more corporatist, and more just deadly for society, for the U.S. and for the world. Don't think for a minute that, see the problem is, by supporting a progressive candidate in a corporatist party and a militarist party, you basically force the movement to get submerged and to lose its identity, to lose its ability to fight. And this is what happens. It's repeated over and over again. So I really encourage people to stand up. This is the time. The clock is ticking. This is that Hail Mary moment. It's up to us or it doesn't happen. And it's not just us. It's not just the next generation. This is about civilization and the prospects for life on the planet. It's time to stand up for all that we believe in, for our most deeply held values, while we still can. And the bottom line is we must reject the lesser evil and stand up and fight for the greater good like our lives depend on it, because they do.
So I spoke the other day with Margaret Kimberly. She writes for Black Agenda Report. You probably know Margaret. We talked about the liberal-left divide, which, people who identify as liberal tend to sort of vote collectively with the Democratic Party, see the establishment within there, and then those of us who are sort of more on the radical left, see ourselves differently and don't feel so aligned. And I was trying to say, how do people fit into those camps? How does that happen? Now, in our household, we don't have television, so we're not programmed by MSNBC and all those sort of channeling people into that one box. But in my car, for instance, I have satellite radio. And there's the so-called Progress channel on satellite radio, which is the only place we're going to hear so-called progressive news. But that's all about supporting the Democrats. The Republicans are crazy, and we're the sane ones. Whoever our nominee is, we're the sane ones. They're crazy. And you can really see why, there's never a conversation about Gary Johnson, a libertarian candidate, a Green Party, yourself. I mean, that is just missing altogether. And you realize, when I bring it up to people, they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, what are you talking about? Rachel Maddow hasn't spoken to me about this, so it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, Louis Brandeis said it well, the Supreme Court Justice. In the last century, he said that we have a choice between vast concentrations of wealth or democracy. And those vast concentrations of wealth have a way of basically sabotaging all of the institutions that democracy depend on. And the press is one of them. It's not only the liberal left divide, I think it's also the creation of the Donald Trump phenomenon and the train wreck that the Republican Party has become, of basically lifting up these psychopathic characters that seem to just not have human attributes and hearts and compassion and things like that. It's just staggering that these people should be lifted up as heroes. Donald Trump, I think in many ways exemplifies the problem because he is a creation of the media. He got hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, billions actually, of dollars worth of free media from the very get-go. And so he was kind of made out to be their hero. I heard the president, I think it was of CBS, saying the other day that, what a horrible thing this is for the country, but it sure is great for corporate media. So bring it on, Donald Trump. It's that kind of vicious, cutthroat materialism, I think, that underscores what's wrong, at so many levels of society. But by creating a corporate, very powerful, consolidated media, we've really sabotaged the democratic process. It makes it very difficult. But in spite of that, I think it's really important to remember that most people are not buying into this. That I think it's something like that 17% of Republicans. This was after the 2015 primary, the March 15th primary. I heard this statistic that 17% of Republicans were coming out to vote. And even so, Trump was mostly below a majority. So that's not so many even Republicans. And Republicans are a small portion of the electorate, all total. So we're being made to feel like resistance is futile and that these really despicable fear-mongering, hate-mongering characters represent the American public, and they really don't. To my mind, it's reason for us to just double down, and redouble our efforts and lift up, not only the humane values that we represent and that most people still buy into, but also to really invigorate the political process and to fight this battle in this election and beyond this election. We need to bring the sectors of justice for racial justice and economic and climate justice and peace. We need to bring these sectors together because if we're divided, we're conquered. And that's how the system would like us to be, just working in our own little spheres. Political parties are supposed to bring us together. The corporate political parties don't. They've been hijacked. They're just serving their corporate masters and their billionaire funders. This is why we need an independent political party like the Green Party. We're the one surviving national scale political party of by and for the people that can provide a framework in which we can come together and build. All other efforts, in my view, are a distraction.
Right. And we both agree, and our colleagues or friends and colleagues agree, but the message seems to be bumping up against the mainstream media, as we know. And I have this fantasy that there's going to be one day when people go switch on their television in the morning and that nothing comes out. There's no signal. There's no morning show. There's no Morning Joe or Morning Jack or morning whatever those programs are, and that they'll look to see if their cable is hooked up, and they'll at some point walk outside and their neighbor will be outside having the same problem and realize that they'll start talking and comparing notes at that point. Point is that until this television comes out of the picture of the great sort of homogenizer of thought, it just seems so difficult for us to get this message through to a wider swath of the population.
Well, I think it's true that there are, big gaps in democratic communications. They're huge, but at the same time, real life, asserts itself, and people are being thrown under the bus on their jobs and their wages and everything else. And there's that 43 million plurality of the presidential vote in the form of young people who could take over this election. So, in my view, there are the powers that be would like us to feel that resistance is futile. That the empire will dominate, might as well go home, lie down on the railroad tracks and just kiss it all goodbye. But in reality, there are many ways that we can break through. This house of cards is about to fall down, and there's plenty of wiggle room to, begin restoring democracy. And I think working with the constituencies who are fighting angry and ready to go, and that's everybody from Black Lives Matter to the immigrant rights community to especially young people in debt. And nobody's better positioned to get the word out and to organize online and through, and to use social media than young people. Remember, we have won battles before. We stopped the 2013 Syria bombing campaign when Obama had said, oh, resistance is futile, we're going ahead. We actually stopped that in its tracks. We've managed to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was supposed to have been a done deal over a year ago. And we have stopped other corporate trade agreements before when we've had a chance to mobilize against them. We've begun winning the battle against nuclear power plants. We won on the Trans-Pacific Partner line. The Keystone XL pipeline. So there are many battles that we have won, but we're sort of told to systematically discount them. But they're actually big. And saving the internet, we've done that a couple of times as well, when the press wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So, in my view, again, it underscores why organizing at a national level around the presidential campaign is it's a gateway. It's a gateway form of organizing because it allows us to connect for the long haul in a way which is national, but it's also grounded locally, and we can fight local battles as we join together and actually use the power we have. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. Well, we have it, and we just need the courage of our convictions to stand up and start using it, because the minute we do, we're unstoppable.
Yeah, it's funny. I posted on Facebook if anybody had any questions for you, and one of my friends said, "I really like what she represents, but how does she think we get the critical mass?" I said, I think it's just simply by voting for her. But people, I think people are waiting for other people. Like they just, they want to know when they go out to dinner, and like they're not the only one saying, "Oh, yeah, just." They want to know that, their friends also, or maybe somebody else says it first. I find it very interesting that people seem to be afraid to be in that position of courage.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, it's like the emperor's new clothes kind of thing. You just got to be willing to stand up. But that's why, to my mind, the millennial demographic is really critical here because they are being slaughtered and they don't have a choice. And for the most part, they are extremely bordering on cynical and not buying into the two political parties. Many are supporting, not well, a substantial portion are supporting Bernie, and that's their mode of entry. But when Bernie throws his support to Hillary, it's going to be a very big wake-up moment for a lot of people. They're not going to want to go there. But in my experience, talking to people who are in debt, to young people who are in debt, the pain of that debt so trumps everything else that is one constituency that doesn't have to find its spine. It already has its spine, and it cannot tolerate the hypocrisy of supporting the two parties that have absolutely devastated them, not only on debt, but on jobs and on the climate and on the cost of education. Young people that I've spoken with, and believe me, I've talked to thousands on the campaign trail. This is really our leading demographic. This is who is mobbing our events now, coming out in huge numbers as word gets out to young people that there's actually a way that they can fight back and that they don't have to be guilt-tripped about canceling debt. We canceled debt for the Wall Street, to the tune of 16 trillion. We canceled their debt. Do we not owe it to the victims of Wall Street to cancel their debt? This is a generation that's being guilt-tripped into indentured servitude. Absolutely. For which there is no end. This is absolutely unconscionable. No society has ever survived by devouring its young. And that's essentially what's going on now, that the millennial generation has become the latest cash cow for the predatory economy to wring its neck, essentially. And this is abhorrent. This is absolutely vile. And young people are hearing that we understand what they're coming from, and that liberating them from debt is not only for them, it's for all of us, because it'll be a huge stimulus for our economy, but beyond that, we need a younger generation to lead the way forward and to envision the future. Right now, they have been disappeared from their essential role in society. So we need them back in order to lead all the other forms of change. Transformation has always come from the younger generation. It's time for us to liberate them. And when they hear that, they have no holds barred, in my experience. There's no need for us to hand-wring about what are we going to do and how are we going to do this. All we have to do is go out and talk to the young people that who are in debt and get them plugged into our website and get them plugged into local chapters to help spread the word.
Right. What you're suggesting speaks to a morality. Okay, I mean, it's not just a practicality, but it's a morality. And there was probably about 10 years ago, a book that came out by, you might know, Rabbi Michael Lerner, called The Left Hand of God. And his critique basically was that the left has ceded the conversation of faith and religion to the right. And we know what happened in the Reagan Revolution, that they noticed this big space and they were smart about it, because whatever happened in the 60s and all that, breakdown of institutions, and people went, my own life, we all went our own way, and they all of a sudden it was just, it was verboten, really. You don't speak about that. You don't mix these two areas. It seems to me that there is almost a misread. Like the left misreads the First Amendment, the religion part, that the right misreads the Second Amendment on the gun rights part, such that the left, and I'll just say the left, the liberals and the left, it's almost like pragmatic secularism becomes the faith, and that probably a lot of people of faith within liberal and left spheres, we just don't feel comfortable or okay to talk about it. One example, when my daughter was in school, we belonged to a Reform Jewish synagogue in suburban New York. And back at the time of Hurricane Katrina, when the government, we know, couldn't get relief supplies down to New Orleans, and that it was faith groups, Christian, Jewish, probably Muslim groups, who had those apparatus in place to go there and pull together these relief supplies. And we were part of that process. And it really was a big eye-opener for me, because I stopped and said, wow, this is really amazing. This whole line I lived with in my teen years and rebelling against and organized religion is and all that. And I came to see, wow, look at this. We're really doing theology with our feet here. The social action was the theology, in a way that when I would explain it to my friends, and they would still kind of look down their nose and sneer at me for being part of a faith conversation or institution in that way. You know, similarly, my father-in-law is the retired Episcopal Bishop of New York. He had a social action platform which pretty much mirrors the 4 pillars of the Green Party, except that never gets picked up upon. What gets picked up upon is crazy priest scandals in the Catholic Church, or the protesting by the right, Christian right, against Planned Parenthood, when left faith groups have been promoting Planned Parenthood all along the way. But that doesn't get... So there's a real missing space here when we could speak to people. People could be unaffiliated, they could be secular, but then also there are people who have faith and that's a part of their lives, but we feel somehow just, not even embarrassed, just restricted on the left from speaking about it.
Yes. And the abuses of religion as well, I think, also make people, very reluctant to talk in religious terms, and the, the religion bashing and Islam bashing of, Ted Cruz, who's supposedly a man of faith, to be using his faith to bash other faiths, and the facade of the Middle East conflict, which takes, a Jewish Muslim and then a Christian Muslim facade as well, and the role of theocracies, Israel, for example, in creating conflict and perpetuating conflict, and ISIS. The abuses of religion, organized or claiming to be organized, I think also complicate the conversation and make it very hard to mobilize the power of a moral vision and the power of of social groups that are inspired by a real moral vision, by religion in its best dimensions. So it's kind of it's a very difficult mix of issues that are exploding right now. For myself, my experience of religion growing up in a Reform Jewish synagogue in a largely Jewish community outside of Chicago, Highland Park, Illinois, I had, I think, the best of religion in many ways, because it really, for me, it provided a real grounding in social values. And that was really the focus of my religious upbringing, to do justice and love mercy, was to be holy. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like that grounding serves me very well. And a lot of people I know who grew up in that tradition, which is different from the people who are under the sway of kind of the militant Zionist form of Judaism that are, I think very linked to the hostilities, the occupation, the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. So I kind of personally experience both sides, and I live in a, an atheist and agnostic family myself, my nuclear family, as opposed to my, extended family of origin. So I personally live in a mixed religious world, as it sounds like you do as well, and I think most people do these days. And I think there's kind of a quest going on right now for how do we talk about this,
Yeah.
and how do we talk about it in a way that both respects our traditions, because our religious traditions are very beautiful, and the rituals are very beautiful and inspiring, and not to just be thrown out. How do we preserve that at the same time that we preserve diversity, and yet find our commonalities?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, most people that I speak to don't know that. I mean, most in my wife attends an Episcopal church of and there are plenty of gay clergy. In the Reform movement, there are women gay clergy. I mean, that's all accepted, and I think people, when they hear religion, they don't hear that kind of diversity in liberal expressions of faith. One thing, but when there's this vacuum that appears, which there has been a vacuum, a vacuum doesn't exist; it gets filled up by something else. And it seems to me that this vacuum got filled up by not just secularism, but also not so much atheism, but anti-theism, which you see now exemplified by people like Bill Maher. Which why people like this have the platform and create the I mean, these people, they're not even funny comedians, but somehow they're comedians that sort of shape the political debate. I don't get that, but that's what kind of comes in. Second thing that happens is that people worship science as religion, right? So you can't question science. And one area which is so third rail, which I'm not even going to ask you as a doctor to talk about, but talk about the issue of vaccines. So in my daughter's 21. When she was younger, her mother and I, we delayed the vaccine schedule. Okay, when I say to people we delayed the vaccine schedule, they call me an anti-vaxxer. I mean, that's how obscene that it is. That science, the religion of science there. Or you could say the science of saturated fat equals cholesterol, equals heart disease, then equals statin medication. Now we know it's all none of it's true. And but we see that it supports an industry, big pharma, and that you can't question them. That's a holy grail. That acts like a religion in our society. And then the last thing becomes the messianic worship of celebrity. So we don't have the role models anymore because we had that whole space has been vacated. And it gets filled up with who you could say Donald Trump, of course, on a political scale. You could say, Kim Kardashian on a very absurd scale. And you could even say, on the left, people's response to Bernie Sanders, which is my Sanders supporting friends. They don't want to hear critical viewpoint of, here's what I like about his policy. Here's what I don't like about his policy. It's just this messianic worship of he's the one. You can't question him, and that's the end of the story. And it sort of just takes on that whole sort of impression for me that these personalities become bigger than life when we're all together in this as people. The last thing I'll say is that when I argue and debate people about why I'm not supporting Sanders, and they'll say, "Oh, what are you supporting, Jill Stein?" I said, "Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if she's the Green Party nominee, I'll be supporting Jill Stein." That's basically, but I mean, it's not about Jill Stein, and it's not about Bernie Sanders, but somehow you're making it about Bernie Sanders. It should be about a movement. But in this space of messianic celebrity worship, I think this is what one way it becomes represented.
Great. Shall I respond?
Please, yeah.
So I want to point out that there are maybe common denominators among these, the problems that you've identified. This vacuum in the discussion about religion that gets filled with basically nastiness and fear-mongering. Science as a religion that cannot be questioned. Sorry, my phone wasn't silenced there. And sort of hero worship among politicians, because there is really a silenced political conversation. There's so much fear around politics in this country. We're so accustomed to fear-mongering and smearing of independent candidates and third parties. And, all of this could be readily fixed, and all of this, in my view, represents a system which is shutting down dialogue in order to stay the course. So, for example, on the bashing of organized religion and why there's not a more humane and open discussion about that, we could easily democratize the media. We only have to reclaim the public airwaves for the public. This isn't something that has to cost us so much money. And to my mind, this is also where these solutions converge. This is fundamentally about restoring democracy, which we have the numbers to do the minute we stand up with the courage of our convictions and create a people's politics that's capable of moving these things forward. Because we could open up the media so that there are lots of diverse discussions and lots of diverse voices on the subject of religion and its problems, but its merits. And how do we, lift up those merits? On science as a religion that can't be questioned, this is really where my background comes out of. This is how I got into politics, which I tell people that I'm basically practicing political medicine now instead of clinical medicine, political medicine, because you cannot solve the problems of health and disease in a hijacked, corporatized political system or in a hijacked, corporatized medical system, which we have right now, not only in terms of healthcare delivery, but healthcare research is completely controlled by pharmaceuticals and medical device companies. So we don't have research, and in my mind, you'd be nuts to just have a knee-jerk reflex acceptance of what modern medicine comes out with. It has to be questioned, and the funding of the whole research establishment should be changed so that it is not funded by private entities that are looking to make a killing on the things that they are studying with all their conflicts of interest. So that can be fixed by simply, creating for one thing, get the DEA free of lobbyists, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the DEA and the EPA for that matter. All of our agencies should be protected from the revolving door, and they should be protected from people who are a part of political endeavors and who, shall we say, have a political axe to grind. We should not be appointing industry into the boards that are supposed to be regulating industry. So we could create a science that we can trust and about which there's a lot of healthy dialogue if we got it out from under the stranglehold of money. And the same thing on the politics of fear. There I just want to say that there's an obvious answer here which could be implemented in the blink of an eye, and that is to have ranked choice voting so that people don't have to be afraid of an underdog who's actually telling the truth and actually lifting up solutions that we desperately need. We can get that by implementing ranked choice voting, also called instant runoff voting, at the state level. It's a voting system that lets you rank your choices. Instead of just picking one, you rank them. And if your first choice is an underdog that just might win because then everybody's liberated to vote for the candidate they believe in, and the fear thing goes away. But if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. We're already using this system in many areas around the world and in many major cities in this country. So the state of Maine actually has a referendum to begin implementing it at the state level. We could do that in our legislatures around the country. We could do that right now so that ranked choice voting would be in effect for the next race. But I'll tell you that before I ran for office for the first time in Massachusetts, we helped file a bill to create ranked choice voting in that governor's race. That bill has not yet come out of committee 16 years later because Democrats and Republicans rely on fear so that they can continue to throw us under the bus. This is why we need to throw them out of office and stand up and move ahead. Come hell or high water.
So, lastly, the political revolution that Bernie Sanders speaks of, to me, is hollow because it basically consists of sending him campaign money, voting for him, and then if he's lucky enough to become president, you call your congressperson and say Bernie wants this legislation supported, which is all kind of trite. but a revolution that actually has some legs. So you're speaking to young people with student debt, okay? How can they get involved in the process that it wouldn't just be such a top-down that we think we're going to look to some sort of mommy or daddy president that's going to fix everything for us, but to see where at all the levels, and particularly at seeding it from the bottom up, is really going to where this revolution is going to bubble up from underneath.
Exactly. And I'll just say, I think Sanders is doing a great public service here by lifting up, a vision that's really critical. But, it's like you can peek at it from the mountain, but you can't go there from the Democratic Party. The revolution will not be televised, and it won't happen inside of a counter-revolutionary party, which the Democrats are. And for the movement to get submerged into the Democratic Party is very dangerous for the movement because it will lose its identity, it will lose its ability to function. You have to be willing to call out the predators of that system, which are all over the Democratic Party. Most, certainly all the leadership, and most Democrats get their funding from big corporations and lobbyists, and they're there to stay the course. And you can see that in bill after bill, and with the agenda of the Obama administration and all the other candidates. So just submerging the Sanders movement inside the Democratic Party, in my mind, is a very dangerous thing. It will lose its ability to move forward. It will lose its momentum. That's why you need a framework for it, like the Green Party, which is fundamentally a revolutionary party, which supports these ideals, which supports canceling student debt, which supports ending the wars and cutting the military budget and putting those dollars into real security here at home, which supports creating an emergency Green New Deal to make everyone, basically give everyone the right to a living wage job, improving our communities at the same time that we reach 100% renewable energy by 2030. Building this campaign and the Green Party is also part of a fundamental structural change that creates Green Party chapters and locals, including college campus-based chapters. And anybody listening who's on a college or a high school campus that would like to help get the word out, get in touch, go to our website. Say as much on your volunteer form, and we will be following up with you. We're just about to get our matching funds money that will enable us to do a whole bunch of hires so we can really move forward. But we have thousands and thousands of people who signed up to do this. And so the power is there, and the intent doesn't stop on November 8th or whatever the date is. It doesn't stop with the election. It's about continuing to build from there and creating the power structures at our local levels that work together with the social movements. So this isn't about a political party that's separate from fighting debt and ending police violence. This is about working with the movements as the very fabric of the party. And building that in a way that we cannot be stopped, and however far we get in this election is our victory from which to continue building in the struggles, the frontline struggles in our communities, and in the achievement of local and state offices, as well as fighting for not only for a voice, but for the leadership of national politics, because the political corporate parties are not going to do it for us. This is the time for us to stand up for an America and a world that works for all of us. The power to do that is in our hands.
Well, that's a great way to end it off. It's in our hands. Well, thanks so much, Jill. And we'll make sure we have the links to your website, and we'll make sure that people can get out and hear this conversation. And hopefully we're going to wake up some minds. So thanks so much.
Thanks for all your great work, Craig, making that happen.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.